How much of an impact, Sam, do you think this will actually have on the current situation?
I think the expansion of the Rooney Rule will have a very minimal impact. I think the problem that I'm seeing with the NFL is that they like making minor changes that are really insignificant. You go back to the history of the Rooney Rule. In 2003, that rule was implemented, and 3 years later, you had two black coaches coaching in the Super Bowl. I don't know if anyone really understands how statistically significant that is. There is less than a 4% chance that you could have two black coaches in the NFL coaching in the Super Bowl. And so you saw a huge upswing there. You saw a major benefit. Well, fast forward 17 years later, there's three black coaches currently right now in the NFL, head coaches. That's a problem. And there have been minor iterations to the Rooney Rule. So if you keep on making these minor iterations, you're not going to see a major change. There needs to be a major upheaval of the entire system.
That's interesting. You talk about two black coaches 3 years later, and then all these years later, only three black coaches. Is that are you implying that that's the result of owners or GMs learning to game the system? In other words, it was working early on, and then they adapted and figured out a way around it?
I'm not implying it. I'm saying it. I'm saying that there's an opportunity problem. Everyone talks about this being a diversity problem. It's not. There's an opportunity problem, and that same problem exists in corporate America. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about where we're at now is that it took a pandemic, a global pandemic, to be able to get a chance just to see what corporate America and the NFL looks like. You saw people who are in the working class, I'll use this as an example, 70 to 80% African American, who are the workers. And you've got the owners and the general managers and the coaches are predominantly white. 3 out of the last 20 hires of head coaches have been white. That's an issue. And you talk about this being an offensive league. You talk about there being a trend towards offensive coordinators being promoted. Here's the issue with that. And that may be true. Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator, top offense in the league. He's not a head coach. Byron Leftwich, offensive coordinator, top offense in the league, African-American as well. He's not a head coach. And so, yes, the system is being circumvented, but the issue behind it is that it's this issue of cronyism is really what it is. You've got coaches and general managers hiring people who look like them, and that's an issue. That's a problem. You're not hiring the best candidate. You're hiring the candidate you're most comfortable with.
Absolutely. Sam, appreciate you being on the show. You don't have to worry about the NFL. You don't have to worry about a committee. It's your decision as to how we can modify this Rooney Rule to work effectively. What exactly would you propose?
I would propose 2 major changes. I wouldn't even consider the incentive of the draft picks. What I would propose is I would propose a change in the entry-level positioning of coaches. So, for example, most teams have 2 to 4 quality control coaches. I would mandate that 2 of those, or half, 2 of the 4, are minority coaches, number 1. And number 2, I would implement a system of having at least, not only are you increasing the number of coaches who are interviewed for head coach or GM jobs, but you need to have a minimum percentage, call it 30% of coaches that get a chance to have this opportunity to be a head coach in the NFL. I think that unless you see massive changes, you're not going to make any kind of progress. And so, number 1, I would have entry-level positions available for minority coaches, whether it's interviews or even just having an opportunity to get in front of a coach. But also, you need to be able to have an opportunity to be in the NFL and be a coach and have that job. Because once again, you get the job, you work your way up the ladder, and hopefully you get the opportunity. And then at a higher level, you also need to be able to be a head coach in the NFL if you're a minority.
Sam, what are your thoughts about my suggestion that there needs to be some kind of objective criteria that's put in place, whereas you have to have, for example, you need to be a coordinator before you become a head coach. I don't care whether it's special teams, offense, defense, whatever the case may be. In other words, you've got to crawl before you walk. You can't go to junior high school unless you complete elementary school. You can't go to high school unless you complete junior high school. It amazes me that there have been some coaches that have been allowed to bypass, leapfrog over so many other guys, despite being devoid of the qualifications necessary. Shouldn't there be something along those lines included in that mix?
Stephen A., even if there was something along those lines, that still wouldn't solve our opportunity issue. That wouldn't solve our problem of friends hiring friends at the end of the day. Stephen A., you are great at your job. You are great at your job. You are one of the best based on all the statistics at your job. All you asked for was an opportunity. That's all you asked for. So all these coaches, we're not asking for specific criteria, because unlike players, you can measure players based on their stats. Their 40-yard dash, number of sacks, tackles. You can't really measure that for coaches. And so even if there was a specific pipeline, to Max's point a little bit, there would be ways to circumvent that. And so I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a minimum percentage of new hires, especially when it comes from the bottom up, quality control, to be people of color, to be minorities, to be women. That's all I'm asking for. I'm not asking for a huge change, sweeping changes, but we've got to get somewhere, and I think that's a start.
Old expression, you have to be twice as good, right, to get to get to the same place if you're African American. I look at like the baseball color line. 19. What's that? Right. I look at the baseball color line.
I said twice as good.
1947.
Sorry.
Yep. Exactly. 1947. Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby in the National and American leagues. The difference in baseball is they're culling from the Negro leagues like an all-star level players. In the NFL, because it's more subjective and because they're insulated from real business pressures because you can't lose money as an owner, it's not as though only the best coaches are getting jobs. It's coaches that it's dependent upon relationships. It's dependent upon who's going to take the salary, et cetera. How do you address that? How do you address that would go a long way toward making sure the best coaches got hired, right? If you somehow incentivized teams to hire based on ability.
Here's the issue, Max. Teams and owners, especially NFL owners, shouldn't have to be incentivized to win games. African Americans, whether you're a coach or a player, minorities in general will help you win games. Look at statistics. Let's go back. Everyone's been watching The Last Dance. MJ changed the culture of basketball. African American. Let's look at Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods changed the culture of golf. Let's talk about the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena. They changed the culture of tennis.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.